Are you a woman who's interested in, or perhaps you've already developed your training, speaking, or consulting business? If so, definitely stay tuned because today I'm doing a deep dive into my entrepreneur.com article, 7 Sins of Newbie Entrepreneurs. I'm Dana Brownlee, and I am so proud to say that I've worked successfully and exclusively in my training and speaking business for the past 22 years without having to go back to corporate. Praise God for that. Along the way, I've delivered hundreds of presentations, paid presentations across the US and globally. I've been a Forbes Career Senior Contributor. I've authored 8 LinkedIn Learning courses. I've written a traditionally published book and been cited by media outlets like CNN, The Wall Street Journal, Forbes, Fortune, Money Magazine, Redbook, Glamour, and more. So if you're a newbie entrepreneur, let's dig into the 7 mistakes you do not want to make. So sin number 7 is not having a growth strategy. Too often when we start as entrepreneurs, we're just focused on developing our service, developing clients, and executing. We don't necessarily think about how are we going to do that or how are we going to grow. There are lots of different ways to grow. Are you someone who wants to eventually hire other people and then you focus more on client development? Do you want to partner with other trainers or speakers or consultants? Do you want to subcontract? Do you want to develop online courses and get residual income from those? Perhaps you want to develop a membership-based community. So again, there are lots of different ways to grow. For me personally, I made a strategic decision early on. I did not want to hire other trainers and start managing this empire. For me, an empire can turn into a prison really easy if you're not careful. I didn't want any part of that. I was very clear that I wanted to work as little as possible and I wanted my ROI as high as possible. Shout out to Tim Ferriss. One of my favorite books early on was The 4-Hour Workweek by Tim Ferriss. If you haven't read it, I highly suggest it. It was very consistent with my priorities, with my value system. Again, wasn't trying to run an empire. No shade to people who do. We need that. We need those empresses. We need people who are out there doing that. But I just wanted control over my time. I wanted to work as little as possible. And so that's why I made some strategic choices about how I wanted to grow. Please click on the QR code, join our notification list. I'm doing a whole webinar series. In there, I want to share more. I want to do a deeper dive on my 3-phase growth strategy and be very vulnerable and honest and share with you how I've grown over 22 years. Sin number 6. Pricing your services too high or too low. This is another reason why I'm doing the webinar series. We've got to demystify and erase the taboo around talking about pricing. How in the world are we supposed to come up with accurate pricing if nobody's going to talk to each other, if nobody's going to share what they charged year 1, what they charged year 5, how they changed their pricing, or even strategies, negotiation strategies to use? So I really want to delve into all of that. Quick anecdote, years ago, I was talking with a colleague, a guy who was submitting on the same RFP that I typically submitted on every year for this government agency. Kudos to him. One particular year, he got a rejection on his RFP. They didn't select any of his classes, but he went back to the client and he asked them for feedback on why he wasn't selected. The client told him he wasn't selected because his prices were too low. Not only was he the cheapest in terms of daily rate, his daily rate was $3,000 cheaper than the next vendor, than the next price vendor. So that wasn't just good information for him, that was good information for me. I mean, I use that, and that's the type of data we need to be able to come up with thoughtful, successful proposals. Sin number 5, not being willing to work like a dog early on. Unfortunately, sometimes we go down this entrepreneurship road with rose-colored glasses on. We think about all the upside. We don't necessarily think about the downside. I'll be really candid. I'm 22 years in, and so now I am very selective. I do have a lot of autonomy. I'm selective about my clients. I'm selective about my topics, where I travel to, my calendar. But it wasn't like that at the beginning. early on, I was working on my business much more than I was working in my business. And so as a result, I was working quite a lot. And so you just want to take off the rose-colored glasses and know what you're getting into. Sin number 4, trying to do everything yourself. I am such a fan of working lean. It's been one of my keys to success. It's absolutely one of the reasons why I never had to go back to corporate. But if you're trying to do everything, you're trying to be your own lawyer, you're trying to be your own accountant, your own website developer, designer, video editor, you're setting yourself up for failure. So in the webinar, I want to go into more detail in terms of how you can outsource smart. I want to talk about things that I did to be sure to bring in the appropriate resources without raising my fixed expenses on a monthly basis. So it's not that you have to do everything yourself, but you have to figure out how to work smart and to not raise those monthly fixed expenses. Sin number 3, not properly evaluating your business model. So first, what do I mean by business model? Well, for me, business model is just how you're going to make money. Too often we focus on what we do well, and we think that magically that's going to translate into a profitable business, and that doesn't necessarily work that way. I'll give you an example. I am very knowledgeable about spas. I'm great going to spas. I know what makes a good spa. I've been to spas all around the world, but I haven't found a way to monetize it. Because I promise you, if I had, I probably never would have become a speaker and a trainer, because I would have just done that. So, being good at something and then monetizing that are two different things. So think about what your business model will look like, how you're going to make money, what is the demand out there for your product or your service, who are your competitors, what's your point of differentiation, why are people going to choose you over someone else, how are you going to acquire clients. So you really want to think through that to have a very well fleshed out business model. Sin number 2, using overly optimistic assumptions. And I promise you this happens all the time. I remember early on, I was sitting with a colleague who also wanted to start a speaking and a training business, and we were kind of planning together. And just one day over coffee, she just casually rattled off her assumption around the fact that if she got one new client a week, that would translate into X dollars in income a month. And I immediately pushed back on that and said, well, but why are you assuming that you're going to acquire one new client a week? And she was like a deer in headlights. Like, I don't think it ever occurred to her to challenge that assumption. And so as a result of that, she ended up talking to some more seasoned trainers, consultants, and she realized that that was an overly optimistic assumption. She talked to them about acquisition costs for new clients and how much revenue they typically got from a client over a lifetime working with them. So you want to use fact, data-based information. I even took that a bit further. I specifically remember taking a sheet of paper with pen and paper, writing at the top, risk analysis. This was my project manager coming out. And I literally brainstormed everything and anything that could possibly go wrong. For each risk event, I then brainstormed what are some strategies I can use to mitigate this from happening, to prevent this from happening. And then if it does happen, what are some backup plans? What are some things that I can, do as a recourse? That served me so well. I came up with my risk analysis, and then if anything, I used pessimistic assumptions instead of optimistic assumptions. And finally, sin number 1, not setting aside enough cash reserves. I can tell you very candidly, very vulnerably, very honestly, if I hadn't set aside enough cash reserves, I absolutely would have had to go back to corporate. In my case, it took about 1.5 years before my business was mature enough. I was bringing enough income on a monthly basis to not just pay my business expenses, but to also pay my personal expenses, pay me a decent salary, pay my quarterly estimated taxes and have some additional buffer or some additional profit. Most of us have heard the stats that say that virtually 50% of small businesses fail within the first 5 years. And I would submit that that's not necessarily because they weren't viable businesses or they didn't have a great product or service, but simply in most cases and oftentimes because they simply ran out of money. For me, it took me, like I said, that year and a half. If it had taken 2 years, I would have run out of money. I would have had to go back to corporate. It, doesn't mean I wasn't great at what I did. It means I ran out of money. So thank you so much for joining. And these are the types of topics that I really want to do a much deeper dive in the Monetize Your Brilliance webinar series. Please join our list to get notified. It's going to be real talk for women entrepreneurs who want more income, who want to make more impact with a lot less hustle. I hope to see you there.